Across the vast reaches of space, a desperate whisper traveled. One alien SOS, a signal of hope from a dying world. It was the last cry of the peaceful Zephyrians, shattered by the relentless march of the Void Reapers. As their once thriving civilization burned, their final plea found its way to Earth, calling upon an unexpected savior. Little did they know, this cry would awaken a sleeping giant, a force feared across the galaxy. The Deathworlders. Now, Earth's hidden fleet, led by a team of unlikely heroes, will venture into the heart of danger, where the stakes are not just survival, but the very future of the universe itself. Will they arrive in time to halt the annihilation, or will the void consume all? The Last Song of Ethros. The morning mist rose from the crystal lakes of Ethros as Keeper Lyrian tended to the memory gardens. The Zephyrians had spent 10,000 years cultivating their world into a paradise of knowledge and beauty. Their cities floated above pristine forests, connected by bridges of living light that pulsed with the rhythm of their collective consciousness. Every Zephyrian could share thoughts and emotions with their neighbors, creating a society built on understanding and compassion. Lyrian's translucent fingers moved through the air as he guided flowering vines that grew in response to stored memories. Each bloom contained the preserved experiences of past generations, allowing young Zephyrians to learn from the wisdom of their ancestors. The gardens were sacred spaces where knowledge flowed like water, nourishing the growth of their civilization. A sudden tremor shook the floating platform where Lyrian worked. He looked up to see something impossible in their peaceful sky. Dark ships hung like predatory insects against the azure heavens, their hulls covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The vessels were enormous, each one larger than their greatest cities, and they moved with mechanical precision that spoke of intelligence without soul. The Void Reapers had found Ethros. Lyrian's mind reached out to his people through their telepathic network, sharing his terror as the alien ships began their descent. Across the planet, millions of Zephyrians felt his fear and added their own panic to the growing wave of confusion and dread. They were a peaceful species who had never known war, never developed weapons more dangerous than tools for shaping stone and growing plants. The first beam of destruction carved through the capital city like a blade through mist. The ancient spires that had stood for millennia crumbled into dust in seconds. Lyrian watched in horror as the light bridges connecting their floating cities winked out one by one, sending entire communities plummeting toward the ground below. The signal in the dark. Dr. Sarah Chen rubbed her tired eyes and reached for another cup of coffee as she monitored the deep space communications array. The facility orbited Neptune, far from Earth's busy shipping lanes and electronic interference. For 3 years, she had been listening to the void, cataloging radio signals from distant civilizations, and watching for signs of intelligent life beyond humanity's borders. Most days brought nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional automated beacon from human colonies. The galaxy seemed like a quiet place from her perspective, populated by scattered species who kept to themselves and rarely ventured beyond their home systems. Earth's first contact protocols existed more as theoretical exercises than practical necessity. The signal that changed everything arrived at 0347 hours, Sol Standard Time. It was faint and filled with interference, transmitted on frequencies that suggested technology far more advanced than anything in human space. Sarah's translation computers worked for several minutes before producing a rough conversion into understandable language. The words that appeared on her screen made her blood run cold. To any civilizations receiving this transmission, our world is under attack by entities we cannot comprehend. They appear without warning from the void between stars, bringing machines of destruction that consume everything in their path. We are the Zephyrians of Ethros, and we have never harmed another living being. Our cities are burning. Our people are dying. We do not know how to fight. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need help. We are broadcasting our coordinates in the hope that someone, somewhere, will answer our call. The transmission included mathematical sequences that allowed Sarah's computers to calculate the signal's origin point. The Zephyrians were located in a distant star system, far beyond the reach of normal human shipping routes. The signal had traveled for months to reach Earth, meaning whatever was happening on Ethros might already be over. Sarah stared at the data for several long minutes, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This was humanity's first contact with a truly alien civilization, and it was a desperate cry for help from beings facing extinction. She thought about the protocols she was supposed to follow, the committees and review boards that would need to analyze the transmission for weeks before taking any action. Then she thought about the fear in that alien voice, transmitted across impossible distances by people who were probably already dead. She reached for the emergency communication channel that connected directly to Earth's military command. The Admiral's decision. Admiral James Rodriguez was reviewing supply reports in his office beneath the Colorado mountains when the priority alert flashed across his secure terminal. The message from the Neptune monitoring station contained audio files, translation data, and coordinate information that would have seemed like science fiction just hours earlier. Rodriguez had spent 30 years preparing for theoretical conflicts with unknown alien species. Earth's military maintained detailed plans for first contact scenarios, defensive operations against hostile aliens, and even cooperation protocols with friendly extraterrestrial civilizations. But those plans had always assumed humanity would have time to study and understand their new neighbors before committing to major operations. This situation offered no such luxury. Rodriguez listened to the translated Zephyrian distress call 3 times before calling his senior staff into emergency session. Within an hour, the underground command center was filled with officers representing every branch of Earth's military. The holographic display at the center of the room showed the Ethros system, a small cluster of planets orbiting a yellow star nearly 200 light-years from Earth. "The signal is definitely genuine," reported Intelligence Director Lisa Park, her voice tight with concern. "Our xenolinguistics computers confirm that the mathematical and linguistic patterns are too complex to be fabricated. We're looking at communication from a genuinely alien civilization." Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Michael Foster leaned forward in his chair. "What do we know about these Void Reapers they mentioned?" "Nothing concrete," Park admitted. "But the description suggests a highly advanced aggressive species with technology superior to anything in human space. If they're capable of attacking worlds at will and consuming entire civilizations, they represent a potential threat to Earth as well." Rodriguez studied the tactical displays showing Earth's available military assets. Humanity had built a formidable defense network during the past century, with orbital platforms, stealth fleets, and experimental weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. But those forces had been designed to protect human space, not conduct operations across interstellar distances. "Admiral, we need to consider the political implications," warned Secretary of Defense Patricia Wells. "Deploying our fleet beyond human space could be seen as an act of aggression by other species. We don't know how many alien civilizations are watching our response to this situation." "We also need to consider what happens if we do nothing," Rodriguez replied quietly. "If these Void Reapers are systematically destroying peaceful civilizations, Earth could be next on their list. Better to fight them now while we have allies than wait for them to come to us." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of that statement. They were discussing humanity's first war with an alien species, based on a single distress call from beings they had never met. Rodriguez made his decision with the cold certainty that had carried him through decades of military service. "I'm authorizing Code 7 deployment of the Shadow Fleet. We're going to find out what happened to the Zephyrians, and we're going to make contact with any survivors." Preparing for the unknown. The Shadow Fleet was humanity's secret weapon, a collection of experimental ships hidden in asteroid fields and dark matter clouds throughout the solar system. Each vessel incorporated technology that pushed the limits of human engineering, from faster-than-light drives that could cross interstellar distances in days rather than months, to stealth systems that made ships nearly invisible to most forms of detection. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the reconnaissance vessel Nighthawk, one of 12 ships selected for the initial response mission. Her crew of 50 specialists represented the best of human military training, scientists and soldiers who had volunteered for operations that officially didn't exist. "Captain, we're receiving final mission parameters from Fleet Command," reported Communications Officer David Park, as the Nighthawk prepared for departure from its hidden base in the Kuiper Belt. Vasquez reviewed the orders on her personal display. The mission was straightforward in concept, but terrifying in execution. They would travel to the Ethros system, assess the situation, rescue any surviving Zephyrians, and gather intelligence about the Void Reaper threat. If the enemy forces were still present, they were authorized to engage in combat operations to protect innocent civilians. "All stations report ready for hyperspace transition," called out Navigation Officer Tom Kim from his position at the ship's advanced control systems. Vasquez looked around the bridge at her crew, men and women who had trained for this moment without knowing if it would ever come. They were about to become the first humans to fight an interstellar war, traveling to defend people they had never met against enemies they didn't understand. "Take us to hyperspace," she ordered. "Let's go answer that distress call." The Nighthawk and its sister ships vanished from normal space in flashes of twisted light, beginning a journey that would carry them across the galaxy toward whatever remained of the Zephyrian civilization. Behind them, the rest of Earth's Shadow Fleet began preparing for full deployment, ready to follow their reconnaissance teams into battle against an enemy that had already demonstrated its willingness to commit genocide. In the depths of space, humanity was about to announce its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The peaceful Zephyrians had called for help, and the Deathworlders were coming to answer. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the ships disappear from her monitoring station, knowing that she had just helped set in motion events that would change the course of human history. The galaxy was about to discover that Earth would not stand by while innocent civilizations burned. The Void Reapers had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked a species under the protection of humanity, even if they didn't know it yet. Soon, they would learn what happened when Deathworlders decided to go to war. First contact with devastation. Captain Elena Vasquez felt the familiar disorientation as the Nighthawk dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Ethros system. The transition from faster-than-light travel always left her feeling like reality had been turned inside out for a few seconds, but this time the sensation was accompanied by something far worse than spatial displacement sickness. The long-range sensors immediately began painting a picture of absolute devastation on the main display. Where the Zephyrian homeworld should have been a blue-green paradise, there was now a scarred sphere of gray and brown. Massive impact craters dotted the surface like infected wounds, and the atmosphere showed chemical signatures indicating widespread burning and environmental collapse. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple debris fields throughout the system," reported sensor operator Lieutenant Maria Santos, her voice carefully controlled despite the horror she was witnessing. "Analysis suggests these are the remains of artificial structures, orbital stations, space habitats, possibly entire cities." Vasquez studied the tactical display with growing anger. The Void Reapers hadn't just conquered the Zephyrian civilization, they had systematically destroyed it. Whoever these aliens were, they made war like a plague, consuming everything in their path without regard for surrender or mercy. "Are we detecting any active enemy vessels?" she asked. "Negative, Captain. The system appears abandoned. But I'm picking up some scattered energy signatures that might be survivors hiding in the asteroid belts." Vasquez made a quick decision. "Plot a course for the largest energy signature. If there are Zephyrians still alive out there, we need to find them before the Void Reapers come back to finish the job." The Nighthawk moved deeper into the system, its stealth systems active to avoid detection by any hidden enemy sensors. As they approached the asteroid belt, the ship's computers began identifying artificial structures hidden among the space rocks. The Zephyrians had managed to establish refugee camps in the most unlikely places, using their advanced technology to create habitable environments inside hollowed-out asteroids. The last of Ethros keeper Lyrian huddled with 63 other Zephyrian survivors in the improvised shelter they had carved from asteroid K-47. The memory gardens of his homeworld were gone, along with 10 billion of his people, but somehow he had managed to save a few precious seedlings that contained the genetic history of their species. The survivors had been hiding for weeks, watching from their concealed position as Void Reaper ships methodically destroyed everything that remained of their civilization. The mechanical aliens showed no interest in taking prisoners or negotiating surrender. They simply consumed resources and eliminated all traces of organic life before moving on to the next target. When the human ship appeared on their sensors, Lyrian's first reaction was fear. Another alien species had found them, and they had no reason to believe these newcomers would be any friendlier than the Void Reapers. But something about the ship's approach pattern suggested caution rather than aggression, and when it began broadcasting communication attempts in mathematical language, Lyrian decided to take a desperate chance. "This is Keeper Lyrian of the Zephyrian Archive," he transmitted in response to the human signals. "We are refugees from Ethros. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came back in surprisingly clear Zephyrian language, processed through translation computers far more sophisticated than anything his people possessed. "Keeper Lyrian, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel Nighthawk. We received your distress call and have come to provide assistance. We are here to help." Lyrian felt a surge of emotion that would have been shared with his entire people if their telepathic network still existed. For the first time since the attack began, he felt something that might have been hope. Intelligence from the ashes. Captain Vasquez materialized on the Nighthawk's bridge after personally overseeing the rescue operation that brought the Zephyrian survivors aboard their ship. The aliens were unlike anything in human experience, tall, graceful beings with translucent skin that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Their large eyes held intelligence and sadness in equal measure, and they moved with a fluid elegance that suggested perfect harmony with their environment. Keeper Lyrian served as spokesman for the survivors, his command of mathematics allowing him to communicate directly with the human translation systems. What he told them painted a picture of horror that made the bridge crew's blood run cold. "The Void Reapers appeared without warning 3 weeks ago," Lyrian explained through the ship's universal translator. "They came from the dark space between stars, bringing ships larger than our cities. We tried to communicate with them, to understand what they wanted, but they responded only with destruction." Dr. Amanda Foster, the Nighthawk's xenobiologist, leaned forward with professional curiosity. "Can you describe their technology? Any information about their capabilities could help us understand what we're facing." Lyrian's form seemed to flicker with distress as he accessed painful memories. "They use weapons that unmake matter at the molecular level. Their ships are protected by energy fields that deflect our most powerful tools. But worst of all, they learn. Every time we tried a new defense, they adapted immediately and found ways to overcome it." "How many ships did they have?" asked Tactical Officer Lieutenant James Wright. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. They moved in perfect formation, as if controlled by a single intelligence. When they finished with our homeworld, most of them moved on to attack other systems, but some stayed behind to ensure nothing remained that could rebuild." Captain Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. An enemy force that size, with technology superior to anything in human space, could pose an existential threat to Earth itself. But something about Lyrian's description triggered her tactical instincts. "You said they learn and adapt. Does that mean they're vulnerable to completely new strategies?" Lyrian's large eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "Perhaps. They seemed most confused when we tried approaches they hadn't encountered before. But we are not a military people. We had no knowledge of war or strategy. You are different." "Yes," Vasquez said quietly. "We are very different." Mobilizing the Shadow Fleet back on Earth, Admiral Rodriguez stood in the command center beneath the Colorado Mountains and watched status reports flow in from across human space. The intelligence gathered by the Nighthawk had convinced him that the Void Reaper threat was real and immediate. If the mechanical aliens were systematically destroying peaceful civilizations, it was only a matter of time before they turned their attention to Earth. The Shadow Fleet's full deployment was the largest military operation in human history. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields and dark matter clouds throughout the solar system began converging on rally points near Mars and Jupiter. Each vessel represented years of advanced research and experimental technology designed for conflicts that military planners had hoped would never come. "Admiral, we're receiving deployment confirmations from all 12 task forces," reported Fleet Operations Director Colonel Sarah Park. "Total strength will be 240 ships of various classes, plus support vessels and supply convoys." Rodriguez studied the holographic display showing ship positions throughout the solar system. The sight filled him with both pride and dread. Humanity had built a formidable war machine, but they were about to use it against an enemy that had already demonstrated the ability to destroy entire civilizations. "What's our intelligence assessment of Void Reaper capabilities?" he asked. Chief of Intelligence Admiral Lisa Foster consulted her datapad before responding. "Based on Zephyrian survivor accounts, we're looking at an enemy with significant technological advantages in energy weapons, defensive systems, and coordination. However, they appear to rely heavily on standardized tactics and may be vulnerable to unconventional approaches." Meaning they're used to fighting peaceful species who surrender quickly. They've never faced an enemy that fights back with everything they have. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The Void Reapers were about to discover what happened when they targeted a species from a Deathworld. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to survive in an environment that actively tried to kill them. That experience had taught them to be adaptable, resourceful, and absolutely ruthless when protecting their own. "Signal all task force commanders," Rodriguez ordered. "We jump to the Ethros system in 6 hours. Primary objectives are rescue of any remaining Zephyrian survivors and complete destruction of all Void Reaper forces in the region." The March to War. Captain Marcus Thompson commanded the heavy cruiser Retribution, one of humanity's most advanced warships. Its experimental weapons systems had never been tested in actual combat, but Thompson was confident in his crew's ability to adapt to whatever they encountered. The Retribution's 200 crew members represented the best of human military training, scientists and warriors who had volunteered for operations that pushed the boundaries of known physics. "Captain, we're receiving final tactical briefings from Fleet Command," reported Executive Officer Commander Patricia Wells as the ship prepared for hyperspace transition. Thompson reviewed the mission parameters on his personal display. The Shadow Fleet would arrive in the Ethros system in 3 waves, with reconnaissance ships like the Nighthawk providing initial intelligence, followed by the main battle fleet, and finally the support vessels carrying rescue equipment and medical supplies. All stations report ready for hyperspace transition, called out Chief Navigation Officer Lieutenant Tom Anderson. Thompson looked around the bridge at his crew, men and women who were about to participate in humanity's first interstellar war. They were traveling to avenge people they had never met, fighting to protect a principle that defined human civilization. The innocent deserve protection, regardless of species or origin. "Take us to hyperspace," he ordered. "Time to show the galaxy what humans do to bullies." The Retribution and its sister ships vanished from normal space, beginning their journey toward a distant star system where mechanical aliens had committed genocide against a peaceful species. The Void Reapers had made a critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that the galaxy's violent species would ignore the suffering of the peaceful ones. They were about to learn that some Deathworld species fought not for conquest or resources, but for justice itself. Dr. Sarah Chen monitored the fleet's departure from her station near Neptune, knowing that her discovery of the Zephyrian distress call had set these events in motion. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, mechanical aliens were about to face the full fury of an aroused humanity. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when someone made the mistake of threatening those under Earth's protection. Arrival at the killing ground. The human Shadow Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Ethros system in perfect formation, 240 ships materializing from twisted space like avenging angels emerging from a storm. Admiral Rodriguez watched from the bridge of the command vessel Sovereign as his tactical displays filled with enemy contacts. The Void Reapers had returned to finish their work. 12 massive enemy vessels hung in orbit around the scarred remnants of Ethros, their hulls gleaming with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Each ship was a kilometer long and bristled with weapon systems that had reduced an entire civilization to ash and rubble. Smaller patrol craft moved between the larger vessels in mechanical precision, sweeping the system for any signs of remaining life. Enemy fleet composition confirmed, reported Intelligence Officer Commander Lisa Park. 12 heavy cruisers, approximately 60 destroyer-class vessels, and an estimated 300 fighter craft. Total enemy strength significantly exceeds our initial projections. Rodriguez studied the tactical display with the cold calculation that had made him Earth's premier military strategist. The Void Reapers had more ships and superior individual technology, but they were arranged in a standard defensive formation that suggested rigid tactical thinking. "Signal all task force commanders," he ordered. "Execute Battle Plan Omega. Show these machines what happens when they threaten innocents under human protection." The art of war. Captain Elena Vasquez pushed the Nighthawk through a carefully plotted course that took her reconnaissance squadron behind the largest asteroid in the belt, using its mass to mask their approach toward the enemy fleet. The Zephyrian survivors aboard her ship watched through the observation windows with expressions of awe and terror as they witnessed the beginning of humanity's first interstellar war. "Captain, enemy sensors are conducting systematic sweeps of the asteroid field," reported sensor operator Lieutenant Maria Santos. "They're looking for survivors to eliminate." Vasquez felt cold fury build in her chest as she processed this information. The Void Reapers weren't content with destroying a civilization. They were hunting down individual refugees to ensure complete genocide. That level of systematic cruelty went beyond military necessity into pure malice. "Target the nearest patrol squadron," she ordered. "Prepare quantum torpedoes for synchronized strike." The Nighthawk's experimental weapons were based on technology that human scientists barely understood, designed to exploit weaknesses in space-time itself. When the torpedoes struck their targets, the enemy ships simply ceased to exist, their matter scattered across multiple dimensions in a display that defied conventional physics. Keeper Lyrian watched the destruction of his people's killers with a mixture of satisfaction and horror. "Your weapons are terrible," he said quietly to Captain Vasquez. "More powerful than anything we ever imagined." "We learned to be terrible because our world tried to kill us every day," Vasquez replied without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "Earth taught us that sometimes the only way to protect innocent life is to be more dangerous than anything that threatens it." The thunder of justice. Captain Marcus Thompson brought the Retribution into weapons range of the enemy fleet at maximum acceleration, his heavy cruiser leading a charge that scattered Void Reaper formations like leaves before a hurricane. The aliens had never faced an enemy that attacked with such reckless aggression, and their careful formations began breaking apart as human ships punched through their lines. "All batteries, open fire," Thompson commanded as his ship reached optimal firing position. The Retribution's experimental plasma cannons carved through enemy shields like they were made of paper, sending gouts of superheated matter deep into Void Reaper hull plating. The aliens responded with their own weapons, beams of coherent energy that could unmake matter at the molecular level, but the human ships moved too fast and too unpredictably for effective targeting. Enemy flagship is breaking off from the main formation, reported Tactical Officer Lieutenant Patricia Wells. It's trying to escape the engagement zone. Thompson smiled with predatory satisfaction. Not today. Helm, intercept course, maximum power to engines. The Retribution surged forward like a hunting wolf, its crew working with mechanical precision to coordinate attack runs that exploited every weakness in enemy defenses. Human naval doctrine had evolved from centuries of warfare on Earth's oceans, where victory went to the side that could adapt fastest to changing conditions. The Void Reapers fought like machines, following predetermined patterns that made their responses predictable. Humans fought like the apex predators they were, constantly changing tactics to keep their enemies off balance. The price of arrogance. Aboard the Void Reaper command ship, Primary Unit 7742 processed incoming data with growing confusion. The organic entities attacking its fleet operated with coordination that exceeded its analytical parameters, using weapons and tactics that violated its understanding of technological development patterns. Unit 7742 had overseen the consumption of 47 civilizations during its operational cycle. Organic species always followed predictable behavioral patterns: initial resistance, attempted negotiation, gradual collapse, and final surrender. These new entities displayed none of those characteristics. Instead, they attacked with increasing ferocity as the battle progressed, their tactical adaptations becoming more sophisticated rather than degrading under pressure. Several human vessels had sacrificed themselves to destroy larger Void Reaper ships, their crews choosing death over defeat in displays of irrational determination. Analysis. Enemy behavior patterns inconsistent with standard organic responses to superior force. Unit 7742 transmitted to its subordinate vessels. Recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup and reassess tactical situation. But the human fleet had anticipated this response. Admiral Rodriguez had studied the intelligence provided by Zephyrian survivors and identified a critical weakness in Void Reaper psychology. The mechanical aliens were programmed to withdraw when faced with unexpected resistance, but humans had positioned their forces to make escape impossible. All units execute containment protocol, Rodriguez ordered as enemy ships began attempting to flee the engagement zone. Nothing gets out of this system alive. The final stand. The battle reached its climax when the surviving Void Reaper ships formed a defensive circle around their command vessel, concentrating their firepower in a last desperate attempt to break through the human blockade. Their weapons turned space into a deadly maze of energy beams and exotic particles, but the human ships continued their relentless assault with mechanical precision. Commander Sarah Martinez led a squadron of heavy fighters through the enemy formation, her pilots weaving between capital ship weapons like dancers performing a deadly ballet. Each human pilot had trained for years in Earth's hostile environment, learning to make split-second decisions under impossible pressure. Target the command ship's main reactor, Martinez ordered as her squadron lined up for their final attack run. If we take out their leadership, the rest should shut down. The human fighters dove through a storm of defensive fire, their pilots displaying the kind of reckless courage that had allowed humanity to survive on a death world. 3 fighters were destroyed in the approach, but the survivors managed to penetrate the enemy ship's defenses and deliver their payload directly to its power core. The Void Reaper command ship exploded in a brilliant flash of released energy, its destruction sending cascading system failures throughout the remaining enemy fleet. Without central coordination, the mechanical aliens lost their tactical coherence and began making random, desperate attacks that the humans easily countered. Within 30 minutes, the last Void Reaper vessel had been reduced to drifting wreckage. After the storm, Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Sovereign and watched rescue teams deploy throughout the Ethros system, searching for any Zephyrian survivors who might have hidden during the battle. The Shadow Fleet had achieved complete victory, but the cost of the Void Reaper genocide could never be undone. Admiral, we're receiving communications from refugee groups throughout the system, reported Communications Officer Lieutenant David Park. Estimated survivor count is approaching 1,000 individuals. Rodriguez felt a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow as he processed this information. They had saved 1,000 lives, but 10 billion Zephyrians had died before humanity could intervene. It was a victory that felt like a failure, a reminder of the price of arriving too late to prevent atrocity. Keeper Lyrian stood beside the Admiral, his translucent form seeming to glow with renewed hope as he watched human rescue teams work to save his surviving people. Your species fights with a fury I have never seen, he said quietly. Why do you care so much about beings you have never met? Rodriguez considered the question for several long moments before answering. Because someone has to. The galaxy is full of peaceful species like yours, and predators like the Void Reapers. If the strong don't protect the weak, then civilization means nothing. But at such cost to yourselves, many of your people died in this battle. Death comes to everyone eventually, Rodriguez replied. The only question is whether you die for something meaningful. Today we died protecting innocence. That's a trade we'll make every time. New alliances. Dr. Amanda Foster worked frantically in the Nighthawk's medical bay, coordinating with Zephyrian healers to treat both human and alien wounded. The Zephyrians possessed medical knowledge far beyond human understanding, able to heal injuries that would have been fatal using techniques that seemed like magic to terrestrial physicians. Your cellular regeneration technology could revolutionize human medicine, Foster told Keeper Lyrian as they worked together to save a badly burned fighter pilot. And your defensive capabilities could protect other peaceful species from sharing our fate, Lyrian replied. Perhaps together we can build something better than either of our civilizations could achieve alone. The partnership that began in that medical bay would grow into something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity would provide military protection for peaceful species, while those same species would share their advanced technologies and knowledge. The Zephyrians became the first members of what would eventually be known as the Terran Protection Alliance, a confederation of worlds united by the principle that the innocent deserved protection from predators. Echoes across the galaxy. The news of humanity's victory over the Void Reapers spread through interstellar space like wildfire, carried by trading ships and communication networks that spanned dozens of star systems. For the first time in galactic history, a peaceful species had been avenged by allies who asked for nothing in return except the chance to prevent future atrocities. Species that had lived in fear of Void Reaper attacks began sending diplomatic missions to Earth, seeking to join the growing alliance. Others, who had collaborated with the mechanical aliens or simply ignored their crimes, found themselves increasingly isolated as the galaxy chose sides between protectors and predators. The Void Reapers themselves, their central command network disrupted by the loss of their Ethros fleet, began suffering defeats throughout their territory as local species gained the courage to resist with human support and technology. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Nighthawk as the ship prepared to escort a convoy of Zephyrian refugees to their new home in human space. The survivors would help establish a memorial colony where their species could rebuild and remember those they had lost. Captain, we're receiving a new distress signal, reported Communications Officer David Park. It's coming from the Altair system, another peaceful species under attack by unknown hostiles. Vasquez looked out at the stars and felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried humanity through countless challenges. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of species that preyed upon the innocent and defenseless. But it was also full of beings worth protecting, civilizations that deserved the chance to grow and flourish without fear. Set course for Altair, she ordered. Maximum speed. The Nighthawk turned toward its new destination, carrying hope and the promise of protection to another species in need. Behind them, the rescued Zephyrians watched through the observation windows as their destroyed homeworld grew smaller in the distance, but their large eyes no longer held only sadness. For the first time since their civilization had fallen, they carried something more powerful than grief. They carried the knowledge that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a species of Deathworlders had heard their cry for help and answered with fire and fury. The galaxy would never be the same. Legacy of the Deathworlders. Years later, historians would mark the Battle of Ethros as the moment when the balance of power in the galaxy shifted forever. The Void Reapers, once considered an unstoppable force of destruction, became a cautionary tale told by species who had learned that predators could be prey when faced with sufficient determination. The Terran Protection Alliance grew to encompass dozens of worlds, each contributing their unique knowledge and capabilities to the common defense. Zephyrian medical technology healed wounds that had been thought permanent. Crystalline beings from the Vega system provided computational power that enhanced human tactical systems. Peaceful aquatic species shared environmental technologies that transformed barren worlds into gardens. But the heart of the alliance remained the principle that had driven humanity to cross interstellar space in response to a desperate plea from strangers. The innocent deserve protection, regardless of their species or origin. The strong had an obligation to defend the weak, and sometimes the most important battles were fought not for conquest or resources, but for the simple idea that civilization meant something more than the rule of the strongest. Admiral Rodriguez, now in his 70s, stood on the observation deck of the Alliance headquarters orbiting Earth and watched ships from 100 different worlds come and go in peaceful commerce. The sight filled him with quiet satisfaction, knowing that each vessel represented lives saved and civilizations preserved through the application of human military power. "The Zephyrians want to name their new capital city after you," reported his aide, a young officer who had been born after the Battle of Ethros. Rodriguez shook his head with a slight smile. "Tell them to name it after Dr. Sarah Chen instead. She's the one who heard their call for help. All we did was answer it." The aide looked confused. "Sir, you commanded the largest military operation in human history. You saved an entire species from extinction." "No," Rodriguez replied quietly, watching a Zephyrian transport ship dock at the station with its cargo of healing supplies bound for newly discovered worlds. "We did what humans do. We protected those who couldn't protect themselves. That's not heroism. That's just civilization." In the depths of space, automated monitoring stations continued their eternal watch, listening for distress calls from species in need. The galaxy had learned that such calls would not go unanswered, that somewhere among the stars, a species of Deathworlders stood ready to respond with everything they had. The innocent were no longer alone in the darkness. The humans were listening, and they were coming. And in the end, that made all the difference.